of the Fed.
Your position that there's no judicial review, no process required, no remedy available, very low bar for cause that the president alone determines, I mean, that would weaken, if not shatter, the independence of the Federal Reserve that we just discussed.
The case coming after Trump tried to fire Cook last year, alleging that she committed mortgage fraud. She's denied those accusations. She released a statement today after the arguments, writing this, quote, "The case is about whether the Federal Reserve will set key interest rates guided by evidence and independent judgment or will succumb to political pressure. For as long as I serve at the Federal Reserve, I will uphold the principle of political independence in service to the American people." CNN chief domestic correspondent and anchor Phil Mattingly joins us now. So, Phil, walk us through what happened in court today and what we expect to happen next.
I think what was so striking, in case we've had a lot of opportunities to listen to Supreme Court arguments over the course of the first year, particularly on issues that relate to presidential power and presidential authority. And the 6-3 conservative majority, many of those have gone the way of the president and allowed him to exert more authority, particularly over independent agencies. And I think what was so fascinating about this nearly 2-hour argument today is conservative justice after conservative justice in that 6-3 majority. 5 out of the 6 laid out very clear skepticism about specific points and made very clear that the Fed is not just considered independent, it is very much, in their view, that independence that's the bedrock of really the global economy is something that they are very, very keen on upholding here. Now, you heard Samuel Alito raise concerns about process. You played that really critical sound that we heard from Brett Kavanaugh, who also made very clear about what this could portend going forward if it was allowed to go the Justice Department's way. Take a listen.
Let's talk about the real-world downstream effects of this. Because if this were set as a precedent, it seems to me, just thinking big picture, what goes around comes around. All of the current president's appointees would likely be removed for cause on January 20th, 2029, if there's a Democratic president, or January 20th, 2033. And then we're really at will removal. So what are we doing here?
A question at the end that I often ask myself at various points in the current news cycle. But kidding aside, I think just listening to Amy Coney Barrett question or raise concerns about the economic repercussions were the Justice Department to receive an emergency order here that would allow the president to temporarily fire the Fed governor. The scale of concerns, the kind of pervasive nature of them, not just amongst the court's liberals, making very clear that it doesn't seem like they're questioning whether or not to side with one side or the other. It's more about the scope of a ruling in Cook's favor. So we'll have to wait and see where that all heads. But for the Trump administration and for the president in particular, who has certainly broken every precedent that we've all been aware of as it relates to the Federal Reserve and talking about the independence of the Fed, this doesn't look to be going his way. And the backdrop of all this, of course, is the Justice Department subpoenas of Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who was in attendance at this argument today. His case, or the issues that he's dealing with, did not come up, but it was notable that he was there making very clear the support behind the scenes for Lisa Cook throughout this process.
Really fascinating little tidbit of reporting there. Phil Mattingly, thank you very much for that. All right, our panel's back. We're also joined by CNN legal analyst, national security analyst Carrie Cordero. Congressman, I want to bring this to you just because, and I want to go to Carrie. The Fed and the way that the president is interacting with the Fed, there is something about it that is different from the ways in which he has tried to, strong arm other pieces of the federal government, other policies of the United States of America to his will. Can you kind of help us understand from your perspective as someone who's done so much work on these issues, why that is?
Because of economic policy, the president's distinct view on economic policy. He wants low rates for cheap money for the American people. That was actually his business career. He wants the cheapest money possible to buy hard infrastructure, to buy buildings. So he is a debt guy, as they would say in the markets, oriented to the cost of credit and the availability of credit. The Federal Reserve sends